Trading Blows presents Sakuraba, a fighter's profile.
Sakuraba 和志選手の優勝です。
Welcome to TV Fighter Profile. The purpose of the TV Fighter Profile is to showcase legends of the sport who you may or may not be familiar with. Our goal is to present their biggest moments and provide you with an intimate look at their career.
Last week we mentioned the premiere of this passion project for Nate and I, and what we did was we picked 4 fighters, put it out to you folks to tell us who you wanted to see. Sakuraba, Kevin Randleman, Hugo Bovchanchin, Antonio Rogero, Minotauro Nogueira. And by approximately 60% of the vote across all 3 social platforms, you guys chose the legendary Gracie hunter, Kazushi Sakuraba.
Sakuraba was born February 14th, 1969, from Katagami, Akita, Japan. Estimated population approximately 33,000. It's in the northwest coast of Honshu, which is the main island of Japan. He began wrestling at age 15. Standout wrestler in high school, wrestled at Chuo University, a standout collegiate wrestler as well. He won the East Japan Freshman Championship in his first year and served as their team captain thereafter.
Once his college career was all set, I mean, he's starting to face, he really focused on what he wanted to continue with his life. And like any wrestler will tell you, worldwide, you know, outside of MMA, and there was no MMA at the time, what are you going to do with all these skills he's built up? And so he looked at first, he wanted to continue maybe coaching. He thought about his love of a particular gentleman, Satoru Sayama. Satoru Sayama, known in Japan as the legendary Tiger Mask. He was such a popular wrestler back in the day that this dude, he had his own Saturday morning cartoon. He had everything. So he moved on and signed with UWFI, Japanese Pro Wrestling Organization. Now, the big difference here, guys, when you look at pro wrestling here in the States versus what pro wrestling is, especially back then, considered. I mean, obviously, they love the showmanship. Things come over from America, and the Japanese love it, baseball being something for a big example of that. But in the wrestling mindset, for the Japanese wrestler, they really pride themselves on having what they call shoot matches. And shoot matches, a grappling match almost with some flair, but there would be a technical side to it. Just like pro wrestling here in the States, you have a predetermined winner, but there was high technicality to it, and they really prided themselves on showcasing real skills. In fact, UWFI's claim to fame is they really wanted to showcase guys with true skill in kickboxing and wrestling, and that's why Kaz really signed on with them. That's where he got involved with learning catch wrestling, whereas regular wrestling, obviously, you're going for the pin, in an amateur wrestling style, where Kazushi Sakuraba saw pro wrestling in a more catch wrestling style. That's where he hooked up with legendary catch wrestler Billy Robinson. To define what catch wrestling is really quick, is a classical hybrid grappling style and combat sport developed in Britain back in 1870 by J.G. Chambers. It was popularized by wrestlers of traveling fairs who developed their own submission holds and hooks into wrestling to increase the effectiveness against their opponents. These are the kind of guys that would travel the country and have, like, Gracie challenges, essentially. They would show up at your town, big, strong men. They may have their own match amongst themselves, but then they would challenge the crowd. Guys would come out and get wrecked by holds that no one's seen before. It was like magic to these people. And they developed their own holds. Billy Robinson comes from that ilk. Billy Robinson, he came from the legendary Snake Pit that was started by Billy Riley. I mean, this is where the birth of catch wrestling came from, was the Snake Pit. And Billy Robinson was part of that. He showed Sakuraba the techniques there and really took him under his wing in the UWFI. Really prided themselves on realism, whereas New Japan was more Americanized style wrestling. And they had a rivalry between the two, like WCW, WWF, for example. And since New Japan was way more popular, through the course of storylines, it looked like WFI was looking like crap and their reputation was in tatters. In a bid to reclaim credibility, Yuji Anjo went and challenged Hicks and Gracie in his own dojo in a televised challenge match. between his style and Hickson Gracie. He went to the Gracie dojo. He brought a Japanese contingent with him, and he got disrespected on national TV in Japan, utterly ruining that company and putting them out of business at that point. So after the UWFI went completely out, Nobuhito Takada is actually a trainer of Yoji Anjo as well. He ended up founding Kingdom Pro Wrestling. But the problem is that, the reputation of these pseudo-realistic fighters was in tatters. I mean, it's got wrecked on national television, and now mixed martial arts is gaining popularity. So, in a bid to try to bring people back to put themselves as more of a legitimate competitors in the sport, they decided to put UFC Japan was coming to town, special event. They wanted to send Sakuraba there as a Kingdom Pro Wrestling, Japanese Pro Wrestling representation to show the legitimacy of the art. Because this is back then, if you don't remember, style versus style was still very much prevalent in the sport at that time. And Saku actually lost right away against Marcus Conan Silveira by a really early stoppage, really poor fight. The refs didn't really know what they're really looking at there. He was going, and poor stoppage. Sakuraba was as pissed as I've ever seen him in any fight since then, ever. And turns out that in the finals, Tank Abbott couldn't make it to the starting bell. He was injured. So as a replacement, Sakuraba got his rematch against Conan Silveira the same night, ends up submitting him in beautiful fashion in a style that we'll see for years to come.
Sakuraba's next fight was against Vernon White at Pride 2. Vernon White is a Lion's Den fighter. Lion's Den is the camp with Ken Shamrock, one of the most prominent camps in the world at the time. Sakuraba submitted Vernon White in the third round with an armbar. The next fight was with Carlos Newton.
Okay,
Carlos Newton was one of the top submission fighters at the time, and really an underrated fighter by most people, I believe. And this fight really had everything that you could ask for in terms of submission fighting.
Oh my God. Newton went for a trip takedown, and Sakuraba did a cartwheel with Newton attached and flipped over into his guard.
They wanted to engage right away. They didn't waste any time getting after each other. Newton is a great submission fighter, and he was pushing Sakuraba. He had the skill and aggression to make Sakuraba work for everything that he went for. Newton was also very crafty, and he was very innovative as a fighter, and that played very well into this fight for him.
A very exciting fight. And a fight, honestly, man, that, if someone to me was to ask me, grappling isn't very exciting, I'd put him toward,
this is one of those
This
fights.
is definitely one of the top lists. This is a top list fight for me as something that, here's two exciting, aggressive style grapplers going at it, and the exchanges in this fight, Nate, were just incredible.
I told you last time we saw him fight, he's got some serious wrestling skills. His balance is phenomenal.
Look at the speed, though.
Whoa!
Going right for the armbar. Unbelievable. Oh, he's got it. Oh, Newton has fought his way out. Unbelievable.
One thing I found very interesting about this fight was once this fight went to the ground, you didn't see a whole lot of striking. And Quadros talked about this and said maybe that they had some kind of unwritten code that they're not going to strike much, that I'm a submission fighter, you're a submission fighter, let's do this.
If that really comes into Pancrase rules at the time as well. I mean, there was a real big thing at that moment. If you see Pancrase, early on Pancrase, where open palm striking with standing, but on the ground, there you could strike, but it was, again, unwritten rule across the board. In fact, if guys started ground and pounding back then, they would actually get booed. So this kind of transferred a little bit. That mentality transferred over to this fight, I think.
And Newton fought very well in this fight. He had great transitions. He had some nice knee strikes in the second round, but later in the round, it was Sakuraba, and he worked the right leg, and then he caught the left knee bar.
Oh, knee bar.
Oh, he's got the knee bar. Oh, no. Carlos Newton has tapped out. Kazushi Sakuraba has knee-barred Carlos Newton.
Oh, fantastic, enough knee bar. As you could see, as we're starting building up this his Pride career, the brass really understood what they had here in Kazushi and really wanted to step him up every time. So now we start with Vitor Belfort, a guy that Brazilian black belt, obviously this was his debut in Pride, coming off those highlight reel KOs of Vanderlei Silva, UFC. He had a name going with him, and now you're putting up against a rising star in Kazushi. This was a big moment for him.
Vitor Belfort was by far the biggest name that Kazushi Sakuraba had fought in his career up until that point. He had fought Alan Goes to a draw before then, and Goes did some very good crab fighting against Sakuraba that a lot of people took notice of, and Belfort tried some of that in their fight, but it did not go as well for Belfort by any means. Belfort seemed a little gun-shy at first with this fight, and once Sakuraba got a hold of him, he went right after him with some great punches, but Sakuraba, once he got on top, really took control of this fight, and then once he stood up and started delivering those leg kicks, it was just tide-turning for Belfort, and really, Sakuraba seemingly broke him like a horse there when he was kicking with the legs so many times.
Vitor had a poor run in Pride, and this was a big part of it. You know, not aggressive. He made his name, he made his hay in UFC being an aggressive, fast fighter, and you never really saw that in Pride, and it was a real shame. And no better example than this fight. He didn't really do much. There was no action out of him whatsoever. In fact, he pathetically laid down to initiate crab walk more than once during this fight, and it was just, even the Japanese, you know, they didn't like the action.
Oh, what a beautiful back kick, spinning back kick.
He went down on it.
A little bit of a time delay there. That was a textbook spinning back kick.
Wow.
Right down to the lower abdominal area.
Oh, wow.
It was Sakuraba's left leg that landed.
And Sakuraba says, it's okay. He doesn't have to stand up. Do you see it?
But you're right, Nate. The crab fighting and the leg kicks were just brutal. I mean, he had a situation where he was literally grabbing the ankle and then kicking that low kick hard.
Repeatedly.
And when you're just laying repeatedly, and they pointed out in the second round, just the hamburger meat on this guy's leg. It was brutal.
And now look at that left thigh.
Wow. Yeah, that's going to take his toll. For sure. For sure.
Especially psychologically as well as physically.
And when you're laying down like this, you're not extending the leg out. You're not clenching it. It's just loose meat in there, basically, and you're just getting cracked.
Vitor Belfort's leg in that fight was as bruised as any leg I've ever seen in a fight.
And really what it was for me, this fight, Hoyler goes to go back to it, the crab fighting. Kazushi Sakuraba can really be looked at as a guy that forced pure BJJ guys to figure it out in terms of wrestling. Wrestling, you know you're not going for submissions, but control and being able to control where the fight goes is something that a wrestler does very well. Finishing a fight is somebody that, you know, jiu-jitsu guys purely could do off their back. But how you get into your back? You're getting there by being taken down. And we're just really kind of force guys, you know, to take note of real wrestling, real catch wrestling as a style, really set them up as a column in the pantheon of styles for mixed martial arts, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, catch wrestling. Those are all the big pillars out there, you know?
Absolutely. And from Belfort on, he went to beat Ebeniters Frantes Braga with an armbar, Anthony Macias with an armbar, but then came the big fight with Royler Gracie.
Big step up in competition. The venerated. The family that put mixed martial arts on the map, the Gracies. And, you know, and their first guys against Royler Gracie, a man that was honestly undersized. If we were looking at it as UFC today, Hoyler and Saku would not be in the same weight class together, and he was actually undersized to Saku a little bit. So
they say that they believe that he was undersized by 25 to 30 pounds.
But also, the Gracies, in their hubris, thought it wasn't a big deal because, in their mind, Hoyler was the greatest technician amongst their bloodline. Like, obviously Hickson being the world champion, being the grandfather, the whole thing, in terms of the grandmaster, so to speak, the M. Bison at the end of the level. Whereas Hoyler, he was the clean technical guy, and he would now showcase the beautiful jiu-jitsu. And, other guys, the previous jiu-jitsu masters that Kaz has beat, not a big deal. Like, now we're talking about the Gracie jiu-jitsu. And it didn't fare much better for him either, Nate.
No, Hoyler did something very interesting in the beginning of that fight. He wanted to get it right to the ground very quickly, which didn't surprise anybody, but he had this butterfly guard, and he was holding Sakuraba's shoulders way up high, trying to pull down, kind of like as if he's like holding on his neck, trying to wear him out and tire him out with that technique.
Right now, Gracie is basically playing a jiu-jitsu match with him.
Yeah, they should. If they don't move, get up. Because this is not fighting now, right now.
Because, there's nothing worse than someone holding on your neck and pulling it down all the time. And he was doing a technique like that, which I found very interesting. But Sakuraba softened him up pretty quickly with punches. And then once Hoyler got all that open, Sakuraba got up and they were back to more of the same with the crab fighting and the kicks. And Hoyler had a punishing look on his face throughout much of that fight. You could see the pain on his face with many of those kicks, many of those strikes. And this fight did not go well for him at all, obviously. There was never a time when Hoyler was really in this fight, it didn't seem. And and by watching it, it looked like it could have been stopped there a few times when he was in the crab position. The pain on his face was very evident throughout the fight.
Again, completely outclassed here. I mean, it was whereas the whole country had no idea how to handle jiu-jitsu, it was if finally the Japanese populace had something that...
Oh, beautiful right spinning back kick. Hoyler has just got to be thinking, what's next? He has no idea what to do with Kazushi Sakuraba at this moment.
Oh, his timing, man. Wow.
Sakuraba has got Hoyler so figured out. Oh, beautiful. And it was from the front.
Well, they finally had a kryptonite to it, it seemed. It seemed like this new Japanese catch wrestling technique that Takada and Sakuraba and others perfected is this new thing that can finally stop Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. This was still a time when style versus style reigned supreme.
Jiu-Jitsu was still a mystery to mainstream populace at this time. It wasn't too long ago when you look at. I mean, this is prior to 2000. This is not a long time ago when 1993 hoist Gracie. Not a long time has passed, and guys have now taken the mantle. Of course, it was a very dominant style that people thought no one could figure out. So at this point, Hoyler gets finished by Sakuraba with a reverse, figure four Americana with the shoulder lock. Gets him with that.
Oh no! This is not good for Hoyler, because this is one of Sakuraba's signature moves in the gym. We haven't seen him use it in a fight yet, but this is one of his signature moves that they work quite a bit on at Takada Dojo.
Oh, he's got it.
He's twisting that arm. He's got the Kimura. He's really jacking that arm around. We're getting near the end of the round here. Hoyler is in deep trouble.
If I was Sakuraba, oh no, he cannot. His left leg is caught, eh? Because now he's pushing the leg against his own leg, you see? He cannot go any further.
Right. Okay.
Which was very controversial for the Gracies. They were very upset over it. They said that the referee should not be able to stop the fight. They fought the decision, and it really turned into a bad blood situation between the Pride people and the Gracie people.
If you go back even further, you got a foundation man in Anjo. Basically, the Gracies helped lose Kazushi's his job. I mean, essentially. I mean, if it wasn't for Hicks and Gracie dominating that guy on national TV, the Union of Professional Wrestling Guys, they wouldn't have went out of business. It goes all the way back then. I mean, Takada took, the Gracies took money out of Takada's pocket essentially and disrespected him on national TV. Their whole style was completely defunct. So now you go forward. Now you finally get a situation where the Gracies have to eat crow a little bit. No, your boy didn't tap, but his shoulder was, in the opposite direction, and anybody watching that would have stopped that fight. I mean, there was a car wreck on national TV.
Absolutely.
So it was horrendous. So yes, at the moment, the undefeated record of the Gracies was still intact technically, but we all knew what happened, and it was an embarrassment to them.
Following the Hoyler fight, it seemed as if Sakuraba had fully arrived. He was one of the top guys in the world. Everybody wanted a shot at this new guy. Who was it going to be next? Up next was Guy Mezger. Guy Mezger was really the top guy at Lions Den at the time, and one of the top fighters in the world at the time.
This is the opening round of the very first Pride Grand Prix in 2000, a monumental event in the history of the sport.
Mezger had been fighting top guys. He had just lost to Tito recently before this. He had beat Tito before then, so they were 1-1. But Mezger was one of the top guys in the world. He was the appropriate competitor at the time. Silva and Liddell both knocked him out later on, but he was the top shelf guy when he fought Sakuraba. Mezger presented different challenges than previous opponents because he was more of a stand-up fighter with solid wrestling. He could thwart many of the things that Sakuraba was great at and provide better stand-up fighting than what Sakuraba can put up with. I'll say Mezger came out with this good game plan where he would throw his hands and tag Sakuraba up a few times. And then there was a feeling going on in the fight where Sakuraba couldn't do what he wanted. He couldn't take Mezger down, and Mezger was really controlling the fight.
There's the back kick. This is clearly, he telegraphed it a little bit. Guy's a little bit too good of a kickboxer. Sakuraba has landed that mainly against grappling-oriented opponents. Guy being that he has a solid... Oh, there's the shoot, and Guy sprawls perfectly. And they're back into a stand-up. Guy throws that overhand right. that was a nice little sequence of action. Guy Messer did good defense there, boss.
He's doing really good. Both are doing really good. They're looking at each other, and right now, the accuracy of Guy is a little bit better. There we go.
You're right, Nate. It was definitely a situation where wrestling pedigrees in a way, but they both could wrestle very well, and the striking was clearly dipped on Guy Mesger's side for sure.
And the fight was kind of hard to call, but I do lean toward Mesger for sure because of the striking. It seemed to be the one thing moving the needle because there wasn't an awful lot of significant action. No one ever seemed seriously hurt. So I really have to just go off of what I see as points, and the points that I saw were the strikes that Mesger landed.
First of all, this whole situation, this fight, really was a disservice to Guy Mesger.
Absolutely.
Okay? All right? It's a disservice to Guy Mesger, and not because of the Japanese judges. They wanted to go to an overtime round, and Ken Shamrock, being the baby that he was in that ring, decided to take his man and throw him out of the ring and disqualify him from not doing it.
He's pretty upset here. There seems to be a scene in the ring. Ken Shamrock is very upset, and he's ordering Guy Mesger to go back to the dressing room.
They never said it was a wrap. Sakuraba was going to win. It was too close to call. I completely agree. They had the overtime round in place for that reason, and Ken Shamrock, in one of the many stupid moves this guy's done in his career, had decided, Guy Mesger, no, you don't get the chance to beat Sakuraba and go on to fight Hoist Gracie in the next round. You get to go home now and call a forfeit. If I was Guy Mesger, I would have left Lions Den that night. I mean, that is unbelievable. Guy Mesger had no problem going back out there. I mean, yeah, was he pissed it didn't get the decision right away? Fine. But if you look back at the fight, yes, it was close, and you could give it to Guy, I guess. You're in Japan. You're talking about Pride Fighting Championships, their first Grand Prix tournament. You're up against it. Give me a break, Guy. It wasn't like it was an egregious call by any means. And Ken Shamrock screwed over Guy Mesger for that. Screwed him over.
I have a hard time believing that he was looking into Guy's best interest when he told him to leave the ring.
And then he embarrassingly goes over and starts pointing at Sakuraba and the crew. Like, what, you showing us now? You just ruined the fight, Ken. I mean, what are we talking about, man? That was a horrendous moment. And you know what? But all they ended up doing was give the win to Saku straight up and down. And, you can't take anything away from Sakuraba. Your man quit. The actual tournament moved on to another event later, May of 2000, where Hoist Gracie took on Sakuraba in a very unique skill set. They decided they were going to institute the Gracie rules, which was very similar to the Gracie Challenge days back, years past, where it was unlimited 15-minute rounds until someone quits, in other words. And that's how it went. And Sakuraba thought it was very odd, and he said he was prepared to go 2 to 3 hours that night. So it was very odd, but he knew that if he didn't agree to that the Gracies would back out, and the tournament would no longer be appealing to Japanese fans. This is all they wanted to see. They wanted to see if Japanese catch wrestling, their style, their boy, can beat the Michael Jordan of the game at the time, of course, Hoist Gracie. So the balls of Kazushi Sakuraba to take that under that kind of conditions is just absolutely insane, and speaks to the mentality of Sakuraba, just the warrior, the killer that he is.
There were disputes between the Pride people and the Gracie family regarding the rules, and like you said, the Pride people were determined to make this fight happen, and they were willing to give the Gracies whatever they wanted to make it happen, because, like you said, this all came down to, can our style beat the Gracie style? And Gracie later addressed this issue about the rules. He said that these are the rules that they created when they created this sport, and that these aren't just the rules for them, that these should be the rules for all, but they won't fight under other conditions than using these rules. I can understand where they're coming from if they're putting their name and their heritage and their reputation on the line, but at the same time, you obviously can't have fights with no time limits.
Inevitably, this is a business, and I think saying something like that, and I don't disagree with Hoist, but you know what, if you're going to have that, just have it be no rules whatsoever. Go no rules, unlimited time limit, and just go. No one's going to sign off on that. We're in the business. This is prize fighting, in other words. There's a lot of honor and pride in the line, of course. But, the fact that the Gracies at the time, they had a stranglehold on the industry at the time. And with good reason, obviously. I'm not discounting that in any way. But you're going to change and make special rules. And they did this a lot. I mean, this is the most egregious thing, But they did this a lot with with Gracie rules. You know what I mean? Like, you can't stand up even though stand-ups are available. That type of thing. Smaller things. But to change the whole dynamic of the Pride 10 by 10 rule set is just crazy to me. But, you know, the fact that, because it all hinges on the Gracie's hubris and Kazushi's unbelievable heart and bravery to try to do something like that. And how he did it, man. And he did it, Nate. An unbelievable fight.
Seeing Hoist's father Helio in the corner symbolized how important this fight was for Hoist, that his whole family name and stature were hanging on this. Here was his brother who got humiliated now. He is the one who has to fill in that spot. It's his chance to avenge that loss and to avenge his father's loss to Kimura in 1951. It is impossible to overstate the significance of the Sakuraba Hoist Gracie fight.
Okay, guys, this is it. The fight of the century, to some degree.
This is the fight of the century. It really is.
Would you agree that it was probably the biggest fight in the sport up until that point?
Oh, there's no question. There's by far the biggest of the sport at the time. And, you know, you talk about a guy that founded the UFC, Hoist Gracie, you know, the name, especially here in America, it's huge. And here's their guy that, you know, even under special rules, you know, Kazushi got it done.
You could argue that the Sakuraba Hoist Gracie fight is probably still in the top 5 fights of biggest fights ever in the sport.
In terms of what happens in the fight in general, you know, hey, it was a war of attrition, lackluster in a lot of parts. But what was very significant to it, and every fight fan should watch it if you haven't, it's on Fight Pass, hour and a half, get some popcorn. Here's the thing. What the significance of this was, what is the trademark thing of the Gracie? What is the trademark thing of Hoist Gracie? Coming out in the procession, you know, guys in front, guys in back, the lineage, the Gracie family. Old man, Helio's there. And they're walking up, hands on each other's shoulders, and he's got the gi on. The sweaty gi that he's been warming up in the back like an animal for hours. The gi. Hoist Gracie and the gi. You finally saw a man in Kazushi use the gi against Hoist Gracie, which was another major moment in MMA.
I was very surprised the Hoist walked in with the gi. That's the reality. It's like, in my life, I learned one thing. You don't give grips to someone to hold it.
Oh, look at this with the gi. Good right hand. Good right hand.
Here's the guy using a gi against him. It was a bad idea for Hoist. Hoist should have taken it off mid-fight, actually.
There were times when Hoist was on his back doing a type of crab fighting, and Sakuraba would grab the bottom of his coat from behind and pull him up so he was up on the back of his shoulders, and then Sakuraba would punch down to hit him and stomp him from there. But he was really controlling Gracie with the back part of the coat of the gi.
The major image of this fight that is an all-time image is Hicks and Gracie with the balled-up towel in his hand.
Are they getting ready to join the... Does Hasbro have a towel?
Yes, he does. He has a towel.
Has the towel in his hand. Gordon has the towel in his hand. He's getting ready to throw the towel. I never thought I would see this. They're up. I don't know if he's going to dab him up when he comes back in the corner, but he does have.
And he's the one sitting there, and they actually went to the ring apron. Hickson turned around, grabbed the towel, and they came up on the big screen, and you actually heard Japanese going, "Oh." And he had it in his hand clenched up, kind of covering it, ready to throw it in at any time. And he knew Hoist wasn't going to quit. He had to be the one, as the captain, as the leader, as the standard bearer for the Gracie family. He's the one who had to throw in the towel.
Well, the way that they looked at each other in the corner before they threw in the towel is just indelible in my memory, because you could see them completely defeated. They knew they had no other option. After the 6th round, they couldn't send him back out there. They could have stopped it before the 6th round. And
yeah, they definitely could have.
Because Gracie was hurting, he was limping, he was getting totally dominated, he was getting beaten to the punch, and he was getting embarrassed. And they knew he wasn't going to stop. He never has stopped. He knows he can't stop. He can't say I quit to them. Like, they have to make that call. And luckily, Hickson made the call.
The man facing him is no-no.
He's throwing in the towel in.
Kazushi Sakuraba has made Gracie quit.
He made him quit.
In a significant crowd.
Listen at the crowd.
Standing ovation.
And look at Hoist. He's going to go as a good athlete.
The Gracies, you know, under no circumstances, and I know I can speak for Nate when I say this, are we disrespecting the Gracies by any stretch of the imagination in any way? Okay, you know, you got some of a foundation family for jiu-jitsu, for MMA. Fantastic what they brought to the sport. And it's because of that significance you're seeing this major moment and another moment coming up of the Gracie family. At this point, they had no more excuses. This was it. They threw in the towel. They used the rules they were supposed to, they could have. They brought in their best man. They did everything they could to win this round and finally cement themselves back as God. And this was the moment where the Japanese saw themselves on a martial arts playing field with the famed Gracie family. Sakuraba was later quoted by translation by saying, the MMA fights that fans tell me had effect on their lives are from when I took on the Gracie family, especially the fight with Royce Gracie. From a modern MMA fan's standpoint, it was an unbelievable crazy match, 15 minutes per round with no limit. The only way to win was with a tap out. There was no allowance for referees to stop the fight, an unprecedented rule, and so the match was labeled a high noon duel. I fought for 90 minutes, Royce and I, until finally a towel flew from the ring from the Gracie's corner. It was over and I was the victor. They put their lives on the line to fight for the honor of their family. On the other hand, I fought for the love of my fans. I fought tooth and nail to give them a show they can enjoy, the show they deserve.
It was on that night where he became an immortal. It was on that night where he became one of the greatest fighters ever in the sport. And like you said, Howard, not how we are showing the Gracies all the respect in the world. Sakuraba is considered one of the best fighters ever because he beat 4 members of the Gracie family.
This is where he cemented his name as the Gracie Hunter or the Gracie Killer, depending on who you're talking to.
On this night,
this was it right here.
As long as mixed martial arts is spoken of, Sakuraba will be spoken of.
Unfortunately, that was the biggest moment for Sakuraba in that tournament. He was beaten soundly by Igor Vovchanchin. But then we move on to more, in my mind, one of the top 5 fights in the history of mixed martial arts.
Oh, here it is, Eddie. Renzo Gracie, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Oh, this is going to be a great one. Kazushi Sakuraba. This is the fight of the century. We've been waiting for this. People around the world have been waiting for this.
The Gracies had no more excuses at this point. Their man was defeated. Their name has been tarnished. The undefeated streak is over. Here comes Renzo, a cousin to the straight bloodline of the Gracies, Gracie nonetheless, but a man that really embraced modern MMA at the time, really realized that striking is a big part of it. A mixture of styles, allowed himself to learn, much like Bruce Lee, to take what works and discard what doesn't. Renzo had a more contemporary mentality, and in turn he was a better opponent and probably the strongest opponent that Sakuraba could face, and ended up being a hellacious, unbelievable fight and one of the best ever.
A lot of people thought Renzo had the best chance of all the Gracies to beat Sakuraba just because he had those legitimate stand-up skills like you talked about, better stand-up than any of the other Gracies were known for, and his jiu-jitsu is just as formidable. He didn't have the holes in his game that Royce and Royler had that Sakuraba could expose, and this fight started out fast, had good action throughout. Renzo threw some nice kicks, they went to the ground for a minute, Renzo sprang back up, you could tell he wanted nothing to do with doing any kind of crab fighting with him.
Good low kick by Renzo. Sak pulled out a little bit so it caught the foot rather than the shin.
I don't think you're going to see Renzo on his back playing the butt scoop. He's going to pop back up.
Renzo throwing another good right low kick.
Unlike Royce and Royler, Renzo has real, true stand-up skills that Sakuraba must respect.
Another good low kick by Renzo Gracie.
Renzo was certainly holding his own with Sakuraba until he got his back, ironically, which you would think would be a big advantage for him, but Sakuraba sunk in the Kimura lock in Renzo's arm, and a few seconds later, Sakuraba broke Renzo's arm with the Kimura lock.
What you saw here, okay, whereas other Gracies and even other jiu-jitsu players that Sakuraba went up against previous to this, Renzo brought more of an aggression to it. And Saku was even said, Saku came from an amateur wrestling background where you're penalized for stalling. There's no penalty for stalling in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. At least not then there was. And at the time, there is in amateur wrestling. So you always constantly have to be moving, going for a move, trying to gain position to escape. Can't stall. And he brought that mentality throughout his career. Renzo had that mentality as well. And we got 2 bulls striking. It was back and forth.
But they're coming in swinging bombs here, folks. Don't blink on this one. Good right hand by Sakuraba. I don't know that Sakuraba should try.
Here's another like revolutionary thing that Saku brought to the table. Okay, and he dealt with the crab fighting. Okay, he dealt with the gi. Okay, now you have a situation like you said. This guy takes his back, and any other situation, especially against a guy at that skill level, if you have somebody's back, especially then, the fight's usually over at that point. It's the most dominant position in competitive jiu-jitsu. You're going to get taken, and that was the chink in the armor against Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.
As we begin to spin into the motion, and I still try to reverse him. As he was losing his balance, he hit the ropes and he fell in my half guard. And at that moment that we were spinning, I felt my arm coming out already. And we landed, it was already out. This particular Kimura that he broke my arm, nobody ever used before. Was difficult to find leverage from there, and he was able to develop a strength and a positioning so well from that position that he made very efficient.
Once Renzo had his back, we thought Renzo had a clear advantage. I mean, who wouldn't think that? And Sakuraba had that Kimura, and he spun it around, broke his arm. Renzo talked about that years later.
The fight was very important. It solidified everything that I believe, everything that I had carved in my heart my whole life. That I believed that my mind was always stronger than my body, and he proved it. When I had my arm being torn, and I still didn't quit. I wouldn't quit. I remember looking at the ref and saying, "This happens all the time. Keep going." And unfortunately, he stopped the match. But it was I heard before people saying, "If I get caught, I will let it break. I will never tap." And I had thank God I was always very technical. Nobody ever get close to doing that, but he did, and I didn't quit. So I could prove to myself that I could do that. And that made me a better man, made me a better fighter, made me a better teacher, made me understand better every aspect of the fighting game. Now I can tell you how it is to fight with a broken arm, how it is to if that happens, what do you feel? It's like I've seen that happen to a few guys on MMA, and you see them screaming all over the place, panicking, and when it happened to me, I had a smile on my face. I couldn't, even though the pain was very rough, I say, how could I get, the only thing that I could thought was, how could I get caught on this? How could this happen, but fortunately I learned from it, and I from there I started studying and realizing that the fight only finishes when the bell rings. It's like you can't stop. And in my head, I was already celebrating. That this fight is mine. And, I was winning, I was ahead, and he had no chance of turning that around. That's what I thought, but he did,
And when you saw that fight end, when he got up, you could see his arm broke. Renzo just curled his knees back and sprang up like it was nothing, like it was not a big deal at all to him.
If you watch the fight and you just concentrate on Renzo's face, you could say whatever. He didn't. His facial expression never changed. He understood where he was at. Obviously, he was he's exhausted. He's exerting himself. But there was no wincing. There was no grimace.
No, he didn't. You could tell he was in serious pain just by the look in his eye, but he wasn't grimacing. He was stone-faced.
When you have a chicken wing, and not the drum, but the little piece, and you break it apart and you eat the middle, that's what happened to this man's arm. It's unbelievable what happened. And he didn't wince or cry or anything. In fact, once Sakuraba tells the referee, this man's arm is broken, he stops the fight right away. He looks down to Renzo, and Renzo's like, no big deal, smiles, and like you said, springs up like Jean-Claude Van Damme in Bloodsport. Like, it was unbelievable what this guy's done. I love Renzo Gracie. I love that guy. He's an amazing fighter. One of my favorites. One of our favorites. One of my all-time favorite fighters.
This was probably my favorite Sakuraba fight, I would say. But after this, he goes on to fight Shannon Rich, and he submits Shannon Rich with an Achilles lock in 68 seconds. He follows that with a unanimous decision on high-end Gracie. That is the fourth and final Gracie victim. And he was like the bulldog. He was thought to be the big, strong one that he was supposed to be able to overpower Sakuraba.
Not technically sound as the other guys, but he wasn't mentally there. If you hear any of these guys talk, Boss or Rampage or Renzo even, Matt Serra, talking about high-end Gracie, this guy was a lunatic. Like a lunatic. Even remember back in the Renzo, he got done, I forget who he fought in that same night, wrecked the dude, okay? And then he comes back to corner Renzo Gracie. He's still got the graps on. He's still got the gloves on. Like, this guy's still sweat pouring off of him with the gear. He was a lunatic, this guy. That was kind of the X factor, like you were saying. Yeah, being being the bigger, stronger man, but also being crazy. And he really had no qualms about anything. But ends up being this was the least competitive out of the 4 fights. Sakuraba really took him out.
Following the Hein Gracie fight,
here's another turning point in the MMA community.
This is the one we've been waiting for, the middleweight showdown. Here we get the ice. There's my move.
You perfectly imitated it. Even
Here's a situation here where you had a guy in Sakuraba really show the kryptonite to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But in general, it was always grappling, right? It was always in that epicenter of grappling as the primary, strongest method of how to win MMA fights. Chute box and Vanderlei Silva comes along with this razor-edge Muay Thai style, this Vale Tudo grimy situation, and especially coupled with the Pride rules, was very formidable. And we all thought that just like how just how Saku figured out how to take out the unbeatable Gracies, that there would be some magical rabbit hat way to figure out how to take out these shooty box boys and their razor death killer in Vanderlei Silva. Unfortunately, things were different than what people thought.
Well, most thought Sakuraba would submit Silva pretty convincingly, and that Silva's weapons, while they're effective, wouldn't be enough. And boy, were those people wrong.
And exactly, the Japanese. Sakuraba was going to figure out a way to get this done. He's going to show it like he's done a million other times before this, show us something new that's going to blow us away and be the kryptonite of this style. And unfortunately, that did not happen. Silva's dominance was clear, and they saw their Superman get beat.
Sakuraba in a good position, really in a bad position here. Sakuraba could be knocked out any second. He's got to get the leg. Sakuraba's going to be knocked out. He's going to be knocked out. He's got to get up.
And he's going to get a leg. Remember with Coleman when he fought.
He's going to knock Sakuraba out. Sakuraba cannot take these knees. He cannot. Sakuraba's got to tuck and roll. He's got to pull guard.
Oh my God! The referee calls the fight.
Unbelievable. Vanderlei Silva has stopped Kazushi Sakuraba.
I thought Sakuraba was going to win this fight, but yeah, you're right. The people in attendance seemed horrified. It was like they saw Superman lose. And this shook the mixed martial arts world. We finally saw a real chink in the armor. And I'm sure Tito Ortiz was just, busting at the seams the whole time, because I'm sure that he wanted to go over there. He wanted to be the one to beat him up. He wanted to do that because at the time there was this dispute over who was better. Was it Sakuraba or was it Tito? And I remember when we went and saw Tito beat Tanner in Atlantic City, Tito said after the
13-second destruction, Tito's greatest moment.
Tito said after that fight that he wanted to fight Sakuraba then, and that was probably, 99 or 2000?
Was it this event? This was this event where Tito showed up with his glasses and he kissed Sakuraba like on his face or whatever with the flowers.
First Silva fight.
This was this fight?
It was the first Silva fight.
So yeah, so this is what you had here. This is what you had here, folks. Let's paint a picture, okay? You have a situation where you have, Vanderlei Silva, and we all know who Vanderlei Silva is. I mean, it's the Halloween episode next week. They're one of the most scariest men in the history of ever. And then you have Sakuraba, the complete antithesis of it. Jovial, kind, out there, funny, entertainer. And they have Tito Ortiz coming in with his glasses on.
And he looks ridiculous. He looks stupid.
And he walks in and no one's there to. I mean, I love Tito Ortiz, especially
we were big
back
fans
then.
of Tito back then.
You know me, I'm a big Tito guy. At least back then, no one was there to see you, Tito. No one was there to see you. You're gonna go out there with the flowers, looking like an idiot, kissing this guy. He knew what he was trying to do. Like you were saying, Nate, he wanted to be the next guy. He thought Saku was going to take care of business against Vanderlei, and he was just the same guy he took out himself. He beat Vanderlei as well in UFC. He's thinking MMA math time. I'm the one, as you had said. It wasn't even the fact that Vanderlei won the fight. It was the fact that he brutalized Sakuraba. And this was a theme when they fought. And they fought many other times. And he was brutalized every single time.
Those knees that Sakuraba took to the head were extremely damaging. And then he got the soccer kicks. But Sakuraba was going for broke at first. He was throwing the dukes. He was doing whatever he thought he had to do in order to get him down. But then he had a couple shots from Silva, a couple good hooks, and then it was just curtains after that. He took the knees, he took the soccer kicks, that was it.
An indelible mark for me, I'll never forget, was Saku's on the ground. He's trying to get that signature ankle pick of his. Sakuraba just barely, he's kind of in a turtle position, and he banged, and he sits down. This baseball bat flies over Kazushi Sakuraba's head. He's a low kick for Vanderlei because he was standing up. He throws the kick, and it was at such a velocity that it just banged off of the ropes next to him and like came back really quickly. It was just, you could see the kinetic energy coming out of this guy from Brazil. It was just, oh my God. That was Vanderlei coming out party. When we're doing one of these for Vanderlei Silva, this is his moment for him. And, I can't wait to get into that from his perspective. But from a Sakuraba Japanese standpoint, this is a heartbreaking moment.
Absolutely. And to be honest, I don't think Sakuraba was ever quite the same after this fight. I don't think he ever quite reached the pinnacle that he was at before this fight. I think going into this fight was the highest he ever achieved in his career. And after he fought Silva, he did submit Quentin Rampage Jackson immediately after.
That was his debut in Pride. He went up against Sakuraba.
And I would argue that Jackson wasn't quite the complete fighter at that point that he became soon after. I think he was still learning at that time.
So all Sakuraba ever did was educate his opponents and what they need to be doing going forward. And that's exactly what happened here, where Saku, Rampage, tried to pull out his signature slams and whatnot, but yeah, inevitably, he got him. He got that neck, and it was a wrap.
So after he fought Quentin Jackson, he fought Silva for the second time, and he fought Silva pretty well too until he got the broken collarbone after the slam by Silva.
This was crazy. That was crazy. That was actually, when you look at the Sakuraba Vanderlei Silva fights as a series, this one was the most competitive Saku was, and it's unfortunate that happened with the slam.
And it really seemed like Saku was in this fight for a while. And in the following fight, he did quite well against Mirko Krokop before suffering a broken orbital bone that will be probably talked about in our Halloween horror special, because that was about as bad as anything I've ever seen in a fight.
This is a perfect example of the disservice, and it's going to be a theme going forward now. Now you're starting to see the sunset on this man's career at this point. It's starting to go down. It was really a disservice. Sakuraba knew what he had to do for the Japanese people, for Pride, Fighting Championships, his honor. This man would fight anybody. He would fight anybody, and no better example of that than Mirko Krokop, an absolute killer, okay? Heavyweight
K1
monster.
World Champion. Former K1 World
Champion. Just starting to cut his teeth in this whole mixed martial arts thing, Krokop, who outweighed him by, 50 pounds, a true heavyweight and a true world-class kickboxer, true striker, and he made mincemeat out of his face, and it was brutal to see. After Krokop, we got a submission win against Charles Arseni.
Well, then he had his third fight with Silva, and Silva knocked him out with a brutal right hook to the chin. And some questioned whether Sakuraba should continue fighting after this fight. And I'll be honest with you, I questioned whether he should continue fighting after that. But he went on to amass a 7-2 record over the next 4 years, with wins over Randleman, Ken Shamrock, Ikuhisa Minowa.
There were some great highlights there, Nate. And yeah, you're right. Like I was saying, the sun kind of set a bit on his career after the Vanderlei Silva trilogy of fights. But yeah, man, I mean, he got it done against some heavy competition as well. He never stopped fighting. He continued to fight in 2015. Getting brutally knocked out by Melvin Manhoff in 2008. Shinji Aoki destroyed him in 15 in Rise in FF. I mean, we're talking about.
Well, I can still remember hearing those punches from Manhoff hitting Sakuraba when he was in the side position with those hammer strikes. It was unbelievable.
You're totally right. Here's a man that never stopped trying to get after it, never stopped representing his people, never stopped representing his sport of catch wrestling, and that continues today. He's really trying to get into this submission wrestling, grappling events that are going on. He's involved with that heavily to this day, and I think that's fantastic. The circle kind of comes full circle, where he started in events that pretended they were legit submission wrestling events where they had definitive outcomes already scripted for them. So now we're going to do it in a entertaining fashion, but have outcome you don't really know, have a real sporting contest. And that's where an event like Quintet that he really founded. Now we're up to like Quintet 3 or 4 at this point.
Quintet 3 was a couple of weeks ago. And I'll say that Quintet, aside from UFC and Bellator, Quintet's my favorite thing to watch. I mean, that those are fantastic fights. And the fact that they have the team concept is almost like the old school Survivor Series, how, like with the last one, we had someone winning 2 or 3 fights, fighting 2 or 3 guys in a row. And they're not really fighting, it's submission fighting, but it's still really exciting.
This whole combat grappling movement that's happening is, with Metamorphosis, there's one that Eddie Bravo's heavily involved with, and Quintet is another one. They're really trying to bring more of entertainment value to submission wrestling. And as some guy used to wrestle back in high school, I think it's really awesome. I mean, and this whole thing really combines all those pillars from his life. You had almost like a dual meet situation with 2 teams of 5, going up against each other. The pro wrestling contingent with the teams and the kind of like the stables, like, Horsemen against the Demolition, that type of thing. And that whole Survivor Series element that you're talking about. I mean, this quintet, such a cool thing. And you guys, it's on Fight Pass. You guys should definitely check it out. You pick a team of 5 and you have a total amount of weight that you can distribute any way you want. And, and you can only have it's a kind of like a salary cap in your fantasy football daily fantasy. It's a similar thing, but just weight. And these guys show up, 2 big monsters and a bunch of small guys, or, a bunch of similarly weighted guys, and you go until you get beat. And it's a lot of fun. And, I think it's fantastic that Sakuraba is really continuing to innovate and really continue to be in the community. He's well respected. There's no question. Kazushi Sakuraba, UFC Hall of Famer, all-time Hall of Fame guy, continues to innovate, continues to be there.
And he showed incredible heart throughout his career. He got in the ring with the guys who are on the short list of the all-time greats, all-time great strikers. Mirko Krokop has 29 knockouts. Vanderlei Silva, 25 knockouts. Igor Vovchanchyn, 38 knockouts. Melvin Manhoef, 28 knockouts. When he was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame, Don Frye was asked to make his formal introduction during the ceremony. And Don Frye, who was inducted a year before, had this to say of his longtime friend.
He had the biggest heart, and courage of anybody I've ever seen. I had a pretty good heart back when I was fighting, but it's not even the same solar system compared to that guy. I'm just a child, compared to a giant, when it comes to having perseverance,
And Sherdog had a stat that was pretty interesting on Sakuraba. Of the 15 men to whom Sakuraba's lost, Nogueira, Silva, 3 times, Verona, Filipovic, Vovchanchyn, Leopoldo, and some others, they have a combined record of 367 and 118, which is actually a .757 winning percentage. So he only lost to the very best of the very best. One of the great things about this sport that practitioners really want to put forward is that their discipline is the best. And Sakuraba is the one who was one of the main people who put this discipline on the map. Prior to Sakuraba defeating the Gracies, there was Takada losing to Hickson, but nobody was really giving it the respect that they felt like it deserved. It was Sakuraba who brought that respect to it.
And more than that, Nate, a guy that really laid the foundation for, you're looking at a pie chart of what a mixed martial artist is today. Catch wrestling, submission wrestling is right there. And there's no better, there's plenty of guys who can lay claim as masters of that, but no one brought it with the creativity and spirit as Kazushi Sakuraba.